Welcome back, everybody. This is Dan with Leading on the Frontlines, your host for the podcast, all to do with a little more conceptualized leadership ideas and tips and tricks and topics. So excited to be back. We're in November now, so like I mentioned in the last podcast, we are getting into the holidays. Really excited time. I love spending time. It's kind of cool because the heat turns on if you're in the north. I'm in Montana, so for me, everything gets cold, everything gets cozy inside, and ready for the holidays. And I just really like the time of year, so that's why I keep mentioning it. But really excited. We got a bunch more blog ideas together. I'm going to be putting those out there. So if you haven't subscribed yet, check out my Instagram. I've got the link there in my bio, and I also have it in the description of this episode. So check out the blog too. There's some really good stuff in there just about how to not have terrible meetings, how your mood doesn't matter to your employees, things like that. So it's kind of different topics than we talk about on the podcast. I wanted to kind of keep it different so it's not just repetitive information for anybody who's listening to it, listening to the podcast and then going and reading the blog. So I kind of wanted to vary it a little bit. If you haven't already, check me out, like I said, on Instagram and YouTube. YouTube is just a kind of repetition of the podcast. So if you want to see my pretty face, you can definitely check out YouTube. Handle on both is Leading on the Frontlines. Also on Twitter, Leading the Front. So check me out on that. Again, in the description of the podcast, I also have on my Teachable website, I am offering leadership coaching classes. So one-on-one personalized coaching for you, specific to you, the problems that you're having, whether that be interview skills, whether that be resume building, things like that, or if you want to go a little deeper on more specific a la carte topics regarding conflict resolution, communication, office politics, you name it, happy to go over it. So check that out in the link. Again, that's through Teachable, and it's a service that I am now offering. So today we're going to kind of talk about something a little different, right? So we've been kind of going over different tactics on how being a good leader and things like that, right? Kind of makes sense considering the podcast is called Leading on the Frontlines. But one thing I don't think is talked about enough is boundaries with your employees or even your peers, right? It's one of these things where, like, if you're going to be putting forth all this effort on being a good leader and communicating and empathizing with people and listening to them, right, you're obviously gonna develop a relationship with your people. Some could call it a friendship even, a really good working relationship where you respect one another and you can confide in one another, right? We tend to, if you really look at the time, we tend to spend more time with the people we work with than our family on a weekly basis. Sad fact, unfortunately, but it's the truth. So when we look at, right, if you're doing these things and you're starting to develop these really good relationships with people, you as the manager kind of need to keep in check, what that looks like as far as, excuse me, as far as what that looks like for keeping boundaries within that relationship, because ultimately, like, they still need to listen to you, right? You don't want to deteriorate from within kind of the things that you've built upon to get to where you are, right? So it's a great thing to have positive work relationships. Even so, like, I'll give an example. Me and my boss, we've gone to the gym together for months, and during that time you learn about each other's families, each other's friends, personal life stuff. But the key thing is he's still my superior. So, when he asks me to do things, it's not my friend asking me to do things. It's my boss, and I need to be respectful of that. But he's earned that place in my world, right? I respect my boss. So, when he does ask me to do things, I know he's being serious and he has good reason for doing so. So looking at how to set boundaries with your employees, this can be about how they even just approach you every single day. If they see you, busy in your office, if they knock on the door or they just open the door, do you go out with employees after work? Do you have one-on-ones outside of work? One of the things I used to do when I took my middle management job. And I really enjoyed this. I had 7 managers beneath, well, actually 8 managers beneath me. It was me, an area manager, and then 7 other managers that handled different portions of the sort that I managed. And so my area manager, me and him were constantly in the loop with one another. We'd see each other outside of work. We hunted together, and we had a really good working relationship. And I respect him to this day very much. And I know, and I can say this confidently that he respects me. So, it was one of those really cool relationships with the frontline managers, right? They were operations managers, but they're definitely frontline managers. They're exactly what this podcast is geared for. What I'd like to do, because there's kind of that hierarchy separation between us, is I would take every month I would take one of them out to lunch, and restaurant of their choice. Typically it's like a burger place or a sub shop or something like that, but nothing too fancy. But girls and guys, we'd go on one-on-ones, and we'd meet there, and then we'd shoot to work because we worked second shift. We'd go there right afterwards, and it was so nice because it actually was kind of funny, because when you first start doing it, it's kind of like that awkward, like, my boss is here with this restaurant with me and I don't know what to order and things like that. But once you sit down and you just start chit-chatting, and that was my job, right, to kind of start the conversation, it was really nice to see them kind of loosen up, and you see the human side of them. And you're doing all this kind of foundational building within work on listening to them and helping them develop and looking at their strengths and just all those different things that we've talked about. But to sit there and kind of get more of a human element, and them to see it from you, it's really rewarding, because you're out to eat, you can chit chat about sports if that's your thing, hunting, books, are you in college classes? Like, there's just a lot of things to talk about. And really, you're just reinforcing everything you're doing in the workplace if you are listening to them and trying to create this relationship with them. But that was something that really, really helped, and I actually implemented it. I didn't do it right away. It was something that I did like probably 6 to 9 months after I took on that position, and I wish I had done it sooner, because it was so not only rewarding for me, but you could see the benefits immediately from, that's kind of the goal, right? You saw them, their performance immediately went up, and it was really cool to see. But, and that's great, right? You could sit there and laugh with them and things like that. And the key is, though, and this is kind of the harder part, is you have to know when to turn the switch off, right? Or on, depending on how you look at it. If it's okay to joke with one another. Anybody who knows me personally knows that I love to joke around. I love to bust balls. And but on the flip side of that, when I'm being serious, and I don't mean like in a negative way necessarily, it could be even positively. If I know there's something going on at home and I ask you about it, I'm not going to joke about that, right? On the flip side, right, if me being kind of more of a jokey kind of guy, when I'm being serious, it's very noticeable and obvious. So it's kind of a delicate balance, right? Because if you create this foundation with your team of just kind of laughs and things, they might take it too far, right? Give an inch, take a mile, right? So you have to be, you're the quote unquote parent, right? You're the superior to them. So you have to really be on your toes regarding how are you going to react in the moment to somebody doing something like that, right? If they call you out in an inappropriate way, or if they take things too far, if you have that kind of relationship where you're always busting balls and stuff, and they do, are you really entitled to overreact or blow up or get big when you're like in that exact moment? Or do you let it go and then pull them aside and say, hey, we need to refocus on our boundaries here? Along the same thing with, and I mentioned this a little bit ago, if you're in your office with the door closed, they knock. It seems really petty, right? And and I think from anyone who's not in a position where you have your own office, right? As simple as that comes across. When I had my own office and for many years, and there was a lot of times I had to audit files, whether that be safety certifications or trainings, employee files from start to for their start date to now, auditing write-ups. I mean, you name it. HR stuff, training stuff, things like that. So I'm really auditing my managers on what they're doing, and I needed peace and quiet to do that, right? And I always had to have my office door closed just because it was kind of loud, and I could hear other things. So everybody knew to knock, and if I didn't answer my door, you don't talk to me right then. Of course I always try to be available, but sometimes you're just kind of tunnel vision and hyper focused on what you're doing. But the reason I say that is because if you do have, and I did, I still chat with this guy, and it's been about 6 years since he worked under me, and a young guy, and he was just first manager role. I promoted him into his first manager role, and so he was kind of getting his feet wet on decorum and what's acceptable and things like that. And he just would walk right into my office, and one time I'm having a one-on-one with me and an employee and then another manager who we were having some conflict with, and he just walked in and said something stupid. And it's fine, right? Grand scheme, big picture, everybody involved right now is no worse off for what happened. But a lot of times you're setting conversations up, or you're trying to make a point, and that type of thing can really ruin that, in the moment. Or it'd be difficult to recover in the sense of like getting your point across and things like that. So that's why I say, having respect, yes, they may respect you, right? That's kind of, I might sound like I'm contradicting myself, but I'm really not, because you don't want to cross the line from kind of a friendship of he's my boss and I'm their underling to we're just friends. And that's the hard balance. So just kind of a couple things to keep in mind, right? Some little tools to use. This one I'm not a big fan of, but it's the most effective. So it's I really hated doing this one, just because some of these people, you're like, man, we could be really good friends outside of work. But one of my favorite ones, quote unquote, is if you have one of those relationships that are kind of surpassing the boss underling friendship, and more just a friendship, have a critical conversation with them. Right? Find something that they need to work on. And this could be positive, right? This could just be, you could tie this right into your one-on-ones with them. Find something that they need to be working on, and then really kind of put a little pressure on it. And you're not putting undue pressure. I want to be very clear. Just put a little pressure on it. Put that spotlight on it. And you're kind of bringing everything down. You're diffusing everything a little bit. And it kind of sucks, right? Because it's like, oh, I like this person. I don't want to think that I don't want them to think that I don't like them. That's not what we're doing here. We're reestablishing hierarchy, right? That's the, if there's any other takeaway outside of this little bit here, is that you're reestablishing hierarchy. That positional respect. And because you're doing that, and then doing the things that we've talked about, following up with them, right? Talking to them about their ideas. And when it does, if it's something more performance based and it's more public, that you could speak to the other employees, then praising them within public, right? If you keep doing those things, right, that's just going to grow that respect from them to you, while you're establishing a very solid hierarchy with them. So you can still maintain that level of respect. You can still maintain that level of friendship, but you're not exceeding it because you're keeping that hierarchy in check. So that's kind of what I wanted to really cover today. The other side of it is outside of office hours, right? I'm not naive enough to think that a lot of people who listen to this podcast or just manage people see their boss and hang out with their boss outside of office hours. I think it's great, personally. I think it's a wonderful, wonderful thing to really get to know your employees. I think it's something that you can gain a lot of respect. And I'm not talking about going to like concerts and a movie and stuff like that. You could, I suppose, but I'm more so saying like, hey, after work, do you want to grab a beer, or do you want to grab lunch before work, or for lunch during work? Hey, can you help me out this weekend? Like dig a hole. I don't know, anything like that. I think it's really good because it kind of shows that level of respect outside of where it's necessary, right? That's kind of a huge step. I mean, if you're getting that level of camaraderie from an employee outside of the workplace, you're doing a good job as long as you're keeping the hierarchy in check, right? So it's one of those things where I think that outside of office hours is great. Obviously, it needs to be appropriate, of course. Going to a bar and getting sloshed with your employees might not be the best thing. Might be if it's like a company Christmas party and it's acceptable. I don't know, but I wouldn't say just going out like that. But just taking some time outside of your personal life, this speaks a lot to them, and vice versa, right? So that's kind of what I wanted to cover today. I hope that I really like that. It just kind of came to me while I was talking about reestablishing hierarchy. So make that a hashtag, reestablish hierarchy. I think if we keep that in mind, right, this will be the last thing. If we keep in mind, always keeping in check the hierarchy and what is necessary in the workplace to maintain performance from both sides, right? Because this isn't like I'm the boss, I'm always doing a great job. No, you can falter and deteriorate also, because you might get upset if that employee reestablishes the hierarchy, because that might happen too. So it's your job. You're put in this position for a reason. It's your job to keep that stuff in the forefront of your mind and keep it in check. I'm just going to say that I think it's excellent to have really, really good relationships with your employees, borderline friendships with your employees. I'm a huge advocate for that. A lot of people will disagree with me, and that's fine. But I think that in my experience, I've had nothing but success with it. And, because it allows other employees to see that, and they notice it, right? If you're not playing favorites, which you shouldn't, because that makes you kind of a crappy manager, but it makes them want to engage with you. And that's a great thing too, because you're kind of creating this really good momentum of like, we're there, this camaraderie, right? That's really the word we need to focus on. So again, make sure that if you've been doing what I've been trying to teach you guys, and you're gaining respect, and you're moving forward with creating good relationships with your employees, just make sure that you're maintaining that balance. Make sure that you're growing these work friendships and things like that. Utilize one-on-ones even outside of the workspace, or if that's not appropriate, because I understand some businesses that's not appropriate, and have a one-on-one lunch with them at the office. Utilize these things to gain traction and respect for each other. But again, I know not to beat a dead horse, just make sure that you always reestablish hierarchy when you see things kind of taking that step too far. If you do have employees, again, that are kind of maybe joking a little too much, or don't listen to you because it's you and you guys are buddies, and that's another key piece where you need to be aware of it, and you need to nip it in the bud right away. It's a difficult conversation to have sometimes, but to reestablish that hierarchy and get things back on track will only benefit you in the long run. So would love to hear your feedback on this one, guys. I know I've gotten a lot of flack in the past by saying that you should develop friendships with employees. So I would really like to kind of hear your feedback and what you have to say on it. Again, Dan Hornacek, leading on the front lines. Check me out, Instagram, YouTube, and on X, leading the front. So again, check out Teachable if you are looking for some guidance. Happy to help out there, and look forward to chatting with you guys. The blog should be coming out at the end of this week, and we will see you later. Have a good night.